Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Monday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle's red-hot housing market is shifting, but that doesn't mean more people are buying homes. Seattle Times reporter Alexis Weisend will explain what's keeping buyers back. But first, let's get you caught up. Hey riders, Sound Transit wants your feedback. The annual Passenger Experience Survey is a way for the agency to collect data about how people use transit in King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties. The survey is open until December 5th and is available in multiple languages. Seattle's Professional Women's Hockey League team is ready to go. All 28 players on the Seattle Torrent will hit the ice for their first group practice tomorrow. On Saturday, the team will face Vancouver's PWHL expansion team in a preseason scrimmage. Watch for live updates and stats on the team's website and social media. And it's Veterans Day tomorrow. To honor the nation's veterans, national and Washington state parks are free. If you do go, reminder, some national parks services may be limited due to the federal shutdown. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Seattle's housing market has been rough for buyers in recent years. The cost of homes here has skyrocketed. Bidding wars are common, but things are changing. As layoffs at big Seattle companies take hold, Seattle's pricey housing market has become more amenable to those looking to break in. Even still, a lot of potential buyers aren't convinced it's the right time to invest. Seattle Times reporter Alexis Weisend is here to catch us up on the temperature of our housing market in 2025. Alexis, really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Alexis, Seattle area buyers are used to not having the advantage, at least for the last few years. What has that been like?
Seattle is a super desirable place to live, right? There are a lot of jobs here. It's a great metro area. And over the past 5 years, we've seen a lot more demand for homes. People are moving here, especially during the pandemic when mortgage rates were so low. They were in the 2 to 3% range. There was a real rush for buyers to get into the market, and that was great for sellers too. Sellers were selling their homes and then also becoming buyers and moving up. And so there was a lot of competition. The market was super active, and we're used to that in Seattle. But now things have started to slow down.
Let's talk about what's changed.
There's a lot of inventory sitting on the market right now because there are fewer buyers in the market right now. And so buyers have more options. And that's been slowing prices down a little bit. Certain areas are different. Certain areas are especially, sellers markets. And so we saw in October, home prices rise 8% compared to a year ago in the Seattle area for single family homes. But on the other hand, if you're selling a condo or a townhome, those are sitting on the market longer, and we're seeing prices go down slightly in those areas.
Interesting. Okay, we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. What's striking to me about what you're saying, though, about this inventory is that we have more of it than usual. One of the driving forces behind Seattle's housing market has been a lot of competition over limited housing supply. Does this mean we're moving towards more housing?
We are. And what's interesting is, like you said, we're really used to this competitive market. So anything that doesn't feel like there's a bunch of buyers in the market, like there's this rush to scoop up homes, it's really weird for us. But experts are saying that this is more of a normal market. Like there should be a push and pull when it comes to buyers and sellers. And so we are in a better time right now historically for buyers and historically for supply as well. But that doesn't mean that we don't need more housing. There's still not enough housing. Part of the issue is that it's so expensive that some buyers are just left out of the game entirely.
Let's talk a little bit more about what's slowing down housing sales.
Well, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of political instability. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. And just this month, right, the government shut down. So employees of the government are being furloughed or not being paid. And then we also had sweeping layoffs at Starbucks and at Amazon. So not only is the job market sort of cooling overall, but people, especially those in tech who are seeing their coworkers and their friends and their family members getting laid off, those workers are putting off what's probably the biggest financial investment of their lives until things feel more stable.
It's funny because, you have to have a bunch of money to buy a house anywhere in this area, but it is as much, it seems, about emotional stability as anything else at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotions play a huge part in home buying. If you think it's possible that you're not going to have a job or an income the year after buying a home, that's really scary for people.
Interest rates came down just a tick. How is that impacting things?
Interest rates have been a real turnoff for people over the last few years. I think it's really disheartening if you weren't able to buy a home during the pandemic and you've seen friends and family members secure mortgage rates below 3%, and now they're hovering in the low sixes. Even though that's historically considered moderate, 6 to 7% is still really high compared to the last decade. And I think that people are waiting to see if that comes down even more.
And pretty painful if you remember anybody in your circle with a 3.2 rate.
Oh my gosh, it's heartbreaking. And we're not going to see rates like that for a long time. That was a very specific economic situation that we were in, where the Fed was cutting interest rates because they were trying to stimulate the economy. We're not going to see anything like that for a long time.
Yeah, and that is financial, but it's also emotional, like we talked about.
Absolutely, yeah.
How's this trend showing up for buyers? What are you hearing from people who are either choosing to buy or choosing to just not buy at this point and sit on their money a little bit?
For people that are remaining in the market, they're taking their time, right? Because there's more supply than usual. They have more choices. And so they're kind of meandering and just looking around. And then they also have the most leverage that they've had in years. So what I'm hearing from agents is that sellers are chipping in for closing costs. Their clients are bidding under asking. They're getting a lot of concessions from sellers. So for people who feel stable and feel ready to buy, now's a pretty good time because you have a lot of negotiating power with fewer buyers in the market.
And I would imagine, the opposite in some cases for sellers who are used to bidding wars on their property. That's all we heard about for years. If you want to buy a place, you better get in there and you better fight for it. This is different right now.
Yeah, that's very true. And it really depends on what kind of home you have and where that home is. We paint the housing market with this broad brush, but once you break it down, we're seeing really different experiences. I've talked to sellers who have detached single-family homes with, big yards. It's in a nice area with good schools, and they're receiving multiple bids, maybe some of them slightly over asking. But if you are selling a townhouse or especially a condo, you're going to have a harder time.
I'm glad you brought up townhouses and condos because for a lot of people, this is your entry into the housing market. It's the only thing you can afford in some cases. How is that showing up right now? Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, you're right. Condos especially were seen as this sort of affordable way to break into homeownership in a high-cost area like Seattle. But on its face, it looks affordable. When you dig into it, it's not actually as affordable as people might think. Rising insurance costs for entire buildings, not just individual units, have pushed HOA fees higher. And as many buildings age and require expensive repairs, condo owners have to split that bill. And so those monthly payments are higher than they might seem.
Alexis, where does this leave people trying to move from renting into first-time home ownership? What does that look like right now?
Well, it's still really hard to break into the market at all. So even if you do want to get into one of those starter homes, a condo, a townhome, it's really hard to save up a down payment. If you do have the money for that and you are ready to make that step, you might be able to negotiate with sellers and get some of those closing costs covered, get a slightly lower price. It really just depends on where you are in your personal life, what you're ready for. Experts warn all the time about trying to time the market, trying to wait until interest rates come down. Housing costs, especially in our area, are pretty much always going to be going up. So the earlier you can get into the market, usually the better, as long as it makes sense for your life.
Okay. And in one case, I think I read in your story, there was a buyer, you made the point that sellers are willing to take the easiest offer as opposed to the highest offer at this point.
Yeah. The longer that your home is sitting on the market, the more you're continuing to pay that mortgage, you're continuing to pay utilities. It makes you anxious. You just kind of want to be done with it in a lot of cases. And so some sellers, in this case, there was a single family home, pretty desirable area, where there were 3 offers. One was at asking price, and this client of a real estate agent had offered $50,000 below asking, but she had waived an inspection because it came pre-inspected. And so the seller just wanted to close as quickly as possible. So the seller took her bid, even though it was $50,000 below, because they could close quicker.
All right, so that's a single-family home seller's experience. How's it going for condo owners trying to sell?
In certain areas, condos are sitting on the market because so many people are bringing their condos onto the market, and so few people are looking to buy condos right now. And so I was talking to some real estate agents recently who said that their condo sellers were, if they bought in the last couple of years, like maybe they bought during the pandemic, selling their condo now, they were barely breaking even or they're taking a loss. I spoke to one owner of a real estate company, and she said that she was having to have really hard conversations with people who bought their condo in the last couple of years, and they called her wanting to sell their condo, and she said, you're going to be receiving less for your condo than what you paid for it. And I think that that's just a really stark example of what we're going through with the home market right now.
I know you just said it's not a good idea to try to time the market, but do you anticipate this trend continuing?
It's really hard to say. We know that more layoffs, especially in the tech sector, are coming. It's really been hard lately to predict what's going to happen with the economy. So it depends. Buyers tend to move sort of as a herd. So it's not clear what that tipping point will be for them. Maybe it's a rate drop. Maybe it's the economy doing a little bit better. It's really hard to say, but we'll see.
So after all we've been talking about, I'm curious, is it a good idea in Seattle to build these smaller townhomes and condos if nobody seems to be buying them? How might this trend that we're seeing now inform the housing supply in this area?
I think it's always a good idea to be building more housing. It's also a good idea to be conscious of what the demand is for certain types of homes. But people who are in the market, they have money for a down payment, right? And so what I think the market needs is moderately priced, actually affordable starter homes. And that can be difficult with any kind of home. Prices for smaller homes are actually rising faster than the prices of larger homes. We did a story on that recently. And so it's hard to break into the housing market, whether it's a condo, whether it's a townhome, whether it's a detached single family home. And so what the market really needs is affordable homes of all kinds.
Really interesting. All right, Seattle Times business reporter Alexis Weisend, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks for supporting this show at KUOW.org. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Andy Hurst, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.